The bright sun after a week of showers was a gift for the townspeople. Despite the early hour on Saturday morning, they spilled out on the embankment to bask in the long-awaited warm rays. Prokhor was not an early bird at all, but today he was awakened by a bright dawn. The sun illuminated the studio under the very roof, walked over the paintings hanging on the walls and stopped on the bed. The guy wanted to cover himself with a blanket with his head, but opened his eyes, glanced at the studio and froze as if spellbound. The rays made their way through not the cleanest windows, creating bizarre lighting. The fingers themselves reached for the sheet and pastels. Prokhor hurriedly transferred this wonderful view to paper until the light changed and the morning charm from the heap of pictures and colors left. Soon the sketch was ready. The dream is gone completely. The guy went to the easel. The painting was commissioned to him to decorate a spacious mansion. A garden with a gazebo in which a couple was having fun was supposed to bloom on it. Similar to the owners of the mansion. Prokhor had already painted trees with a gazebo and flower bushes, but he was in no hurry to switch to people. Ordinary people call it laziness, but those who have even a little deal with creativity speak of a loss of inspiration. Of course, the guy did not lose his technique and could even now draw 20 figures in different poses. Everything will look professional, like a textbook. That's just people will turn out not alive, or better to say, without a soul. Prokhor was proud of his ability to convey characters and moods with light strokes of a brush or pencil. And if the hands drop, it means that the time has not yet come for the picture. The deadlines for the completion of the work were already pressed. To somehow stimulate his muse, the guy decided to take a walk along the embankment in search of inspiration. The artist sat on the parapet near the footbridge, hastily sketching in a sketchbook. Some of them will turn into full-fledged paintings, others will forever remain in the notebook, drawn in several lines. A couple in love who has not yet reached home after an evening date, a runner, a janitor with a big fluffy broom, an elderly lady with a dog and bright lipstick on her lips. They all stopped as characters in a notebook, and then she appeared. And the world around faded. The girl was no beauty, no more pretty. Once glancing at her face, Prokhor could no longer turn away. She beamed from within with happiness. And the legs themselves carried the guy closer. He had never molested strangers with an offer to draw them before, but now he was simply unable to pass by. The girl frowned a little when Prokhor turned to her, but did not stop glowing. Having received an offer to pose for a portrait, she agreed. Prokhor brought her to the studio, seated her on a chair in the middle of the room, and rushed to the easel. He diligently drew the facial features of a stranger. Soon the sketch was ready, and the artist took up the paint. He worked in complete silence, but this model did not bother him in the slightest. She hovered somewhere in her thoughts and seemed not even to notice where she was. The girl had not posed for a picture before and got tired pretty quickly. Prokhor noticed how her inspired face was distorted by fatigue, so as not to spoil the picture, the guy hastily photographed the guest on the phone. He decided that he would draw a slender figure in a thin summer dress from a photo. Prokhor asked the girl to come in for dinner the next day to continue work and walked her to the door. When their acquaintance disappeared, he realized that he had not even asked her name, but what was worse was that he had not taken the phone either, and now he would not be able to contact her in case of emergency. But even this fact did not sadden the master. Inspired by the magical model, Prokhor returned to the canvas with the garden. This time he knew exactly what was missing on the canvas. The work captured the guy to such an extent that he woke up only in the evening. The stomach was clenched from hunger, the light of lanterns poured from the windows on the easel, the finished order flaunted. After dinner, Prokhor returned to the portrait of a stranger. He carefully painted the background, outlined the dress and the contours of the hands under the transparent sleeves, then started drawing flowers on the fabric, and when he looked out the window, dawn was blazing there again. The tired painter put down his paints, collapsed on the bed and slept until dinner time. Prokhor quickly had a bite to eat, not the freshest leftover food in the refrigerator, and began to work with a shadow in the portrait in the folds of clothes. He was waiting for the stranger to appear again, to complete the drawing. Minutes turned into hours, but the girl was not there. The guy sighed sadly. So it won't come. And he so wanted to create his ideal portrait. Leaving the canvas on the easel, Prokhor changed into things that were not stained with paint, and went in search of a store with ready-made food or an inexpensive cafe. The eternal wind in my pockets did not let me roam, but I wanted to eat. He had a bite. And when he returned, he suspected something was wrong at the house. Lights were on in the studio windows, although the artist was sure that he did not turn them on before leaving. He rushed up the stairs, completely forgetting about the elevator. The front door was ajar, which gave the guy goosebumps. Is it thieves? But he, apart from paintings, has nothing to steal, and his work has not yet become so famous that large sums were given for it. It was hard to believe in a kidnapper who highly appreciated art. The guy, as if in a dream, pushed the door. The sash slowly opened, and there, an upturned dwelling. The artist never had a clear place for things anyway, but the devastation in the room did not look much like a creative mess. The paintings were torn off the walls, a few things from the crooked cabinet were lying on the floor, the easel on which the portrait stood was now empty. Prokhor with huge eyes examined everything around, unable to believe what was happening. He took a few steps, stopped and looked around again. Finally, a gruff voice came from behind. Prokhor jumped in surprise. Immediately a heavy hand fell on his shoulder and an unpleasant voice very convincingly advised him not to make sudden movements. Take what you want, just don't touch it, Prokhor pleaded. There, on the table, there is a coffee can in it, 4,000, not much, but still there. We don't need your money. The man noticed with disgust. He removed his hand from the guy's shoulder and he involuntarily looked around. Behind stood 4 mules of those very people who did not differ in resourcefulness of mind and outwardly resembled cabinets. Huge muscles rolled under strict suits, hinting that jokes with their owners are bad. One of them held an unfinished portrait. Where is she? The man pushed the portrait of Prokhor almost in the nose. Who? From fear, the artist really did not understand what they wanted from him. The nearest thug cracked his fingers, clenching them in a fist. The artist's legs buckled. Young woman. The man growled. Where is the girl? So she left yesterday. Speak up, boy. She promised that she would come back today so that I could finish the portrait. I waited, she did not come. This answer did not suit the uninvited guests. The guy was asked again and again about the girl, but he repeated the same thing. Emblem, this is boring. They took the portrait, grabbed Prokhor by the arms and carried him out of the apartment. The last thing the guy saw, like one of the kingpins, was pouring solvent over paintings and pastels. The artist begged not to do anything with his studio, broke free and even tried to bite the escorts. But they paid no attention to his efforts. When the artist was dragged out into the street, he saw flames in the windows of his workshop. From this spectacle, the heart almost stopped, and then it raced at a gallop. Consciousness clouded with rage, and Prokhor rushed to the offenders. The last thing he remembered was the complete surprise on the face of one of the kingpins, and then something heavy hit the back of the head and the artist fell into oblivion. A bucket of cold water brought the guy out of blissful ignorance. For a few seconds he came to his senses, and then pictures of recent events flashed before his eyes. Prokhor abruptly raised his head. He was dragged to some basement and tied to a chair. Out of place, I recalled films with the torture of prisoners. Prokhor involuntarily pulled his head into his shoulders. Now he would have given everything to be away from here. "Where is she?" asked insinuatingly, "A stranger." And then she talked about how she painted a stranger. But apparently this was not enough for the man. He nodded to someone to the side and personal hell began for the artist. After another beating, he was hanging on a chair in a semi-conscious state. And then, relieved, he turned off. I woke him up with another bucket of water, right in the face. "Wake up and go out." Another menacing type thundered menacingly. Prokhor did not have the strength with all the desire. Then a strange hand grabbed the guy by the collar and dragged him out of the door and into a dark corridor. "Who is this?" a female voice asked. Prokhor turned towards the sound and saw the mysterious stranger from the portrait. Now her face was no different from thousands of the same. She was indifferent, shrugged her shoulders and clicked her heels past. The guys grabbed the base by the scruff of the neck, but this time they threw it into the back seat of the car. On the road, the driver with the big man washed the bones with might and main by his employer. From the conversation, Prokhor realized that the stranger was the daughter of that formidable type that gave the order to beat him. The girl left home for a few days to her boyfriend and did not say anything about this to her father. The artist met her at the moment when she was walking along the embankment, waiting for her beloved. Having nothing to do, she agreed to pose, and then safely left and immediately threw Prokhor and his picture out of her head. Unfortunately for the guy, the last place where the girl was seen was his apartment, which is why they attacked him. They thought that he kidnapped her on the orders of another local authority. All this time he was beaten for the sake of confession, but you can't tell what you don't know. Here's a guy who didn't give his teachers any useful information. And this afternoon the prodigal daughter came home. Interest in Prokhorov immediately disappeared. "Forgive me, a little mistake," good-naturedly slapped the guy on the shoulder of the ambal. "Happens." He unloaded the artist on a bench opposite the studio and left. The studio burned out from the inside. Now the guy had nowhere to live, and for some reason this caused fun. "I wanted to find a muse, but I got such problems." "Well, at least he's still alive." A torn package of crayons was lying next to the bench, trembling fingers reached for them, soon amazing flowers bloomed near the bench right on the pavement. "What a beauty!" admired an elderly lady who passed by. Prokhor turned to the woman to thank, but she groaned and recoiled. While drawing, the guy even forgot that his face and body were decorated with fists. He had often met the lady before, she walked with the dog and often ended up in a notebook with sketches. "Honey, what happened to you?" the woman asked excitedly. "The apartment burned down, I was suspected of stealing a person, and now I am a poor homeless man," the guy grinned wryly. "Well, here's what," a passerby suggested solicitously. "Let's go to me and treat your wounds and bruises, tell me everything in detail, and I'll treat you to a pie with tea. My husband was an artist, he died a couple of years ago, and his paints and canvases are still lying around. You can stay in his studio for a couple of days until you find a better place, and I'll have more fun." Prokhor, spellbound, followed the lady. Sometimes life takes everything away from us, but then it gives us a second chance, the main thing is not to miss it.